The College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University has selected another individual to be an alumni fellow of the college, this for 2018, of course. His veterinary practice succeeded not very far from the Manhattan campus at all, just down the road in the community of Abilene. But his career has taken him far beyond the borders of Dickinson County. We're welcoming now Dr. Michael Whitehair. And Mike, congratulations on this recognition, first of all.
Thank you, Eric. I'm very humbled to be acknowledged in this way by my peers. It means a lot to me, and I hope the next couple of days I'll be able to interact and maybe provide some insight about my career and also look at the future also.
For the record, you earned your degrees right here at K-State, correct?
That is correct. I have a bachelor's of science and followed by my DVM there in the early 70s.
So looking back at your upbringing, had you designs on being a veterinarian as you were growing up?
Everybody hopes that they have some role model. I was very fortunate in my family and also in my community. The local veterinarian, Dr. Frank Jordan, who's a familiar name in the Abilene area, was somewhat of a mentor to me, and I was so intrigued. But I also had some influencers because of my family, that I have two other relatives who are veterinarians. One was on the faculty at Michigan State, and the other one was with NIH. The irony of my Uncle Leo in NIH is that he, in a few years back, was recognized for this very same award. So it makes me doubly humbled that I've been asked to join with such an esteemed person in my life.
So as a young person, a child, and then growing into a young adult, did you think of, I want to be a practitioner in livestock, in recreational animals? What was your thinking back then?
Well, growing up on the farm, in my family, I stated a fourth generation. The early history of my family starts after the Civil War and Homestead Act, and has been in that Dickinson County area for such a long, long time. So we were vested in the agricultural side of it. That was our life, that was our livelihood, that's what paid the bills. And so I became interested in that. I wasn't, and early in my practice career, I actually did some companion animal, but I knew that my true love was livestock and working with farms and ranches. And how do you know that when you're 12 years old? You don't. But I seem to have a feel that it was meant to be, and so that was the direction I take. The other personal irony that helped me make that decision, Eric, was that Dad would have me out there on the combine in the summertime, and if you remember there in the mid-60s, we didn't have a lot of special conveniences. So after my eyes would swell shut and I'm coughing and sneezing, I'm saying, there's got to be a better path for me. So I'm just saying that was part of why it was a small part, but it did have an influence on me too.
Yeah, more than a few of us came to that realization over
the
years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I knew what I had to do and I did it, but it was miserable. So I said, okay, I'll do something else.
So you earned your DVM in 1974 from K-State and immediately went into a practice?
I did. I knew there was a voice in me that told me that before I went anywhere, I needed, and this still goes on today, that new graduates oftentimes they have confidence. I had confidence, but I didn't have very good skills. I'm just out of school, but I also realized that first year was formative for me and helped me to decide what I wanted to do. Also, I was influenced by some family things with my wife's family, that her father was there alone. My mother-in-law passed away, so we had a chance. As I told you, I came back to visit around the holidays after that first year and stopped by, and they said, Mike, we want to talk to you. And I said, well, sure. Said, Dr. Jordan Sr. Wants to retire in 6 months on his 62nd birthday. He said, so this is my interview to get the job. So he says, would you be interested in coming back and buying him out of the practice? And I said, oh, give me about 5 seconds. I'll decide. Yes, I will. So I did. So, I mean, how those things work out, I don't know, but they certainly did. And it was obviously a turning point in my career. And so there I was with no money and great aspirations and a little line of credit, and we made it start and have kept going ever since.
Then after a year in practice in Miami County, East Central Kansas, you returned to Abilene Animal Hospital as a partner then.
That's correct. Yep. Well, actually, I was an associate for 6 months, but that pretty short for. But it was the right decision at the right time for me.
Before we talk more about your career path, we want to backtrack just a bit. Who influenced you most as you went through your veterinary studies at K-State in the college? Who was your guider, if you will?
I was very fortunate, and I was glad you're asking that question, because I thought about that, because I had some real heroes. Dan Upson, you think about what a great guy he was. You think about John Nordsey, you think about Jacob Mosier, Russell Fry. You just go down the line, and all those influence, Dr. Trotter, they were my mentors, and I was proud to have them as my instructors, but also as colleagues, and they treated me in that special way, and that meant a lot to me going through school.
And they're all legendary names in the field, so a unique experience for students such as yourself back in that era.
Oh, and I'm sure, Eric, that I wasn't the only one. Mm-hmm. There were probably hundreds of them that were influenced by those individuals.
So in the mid-'70s, you are in practice in Abilene, at Abilene Animal Hospital. What was the state of the practice then, and what early goals did you set for it?
Another good question for me to talk about. I hadn't thought about for a while, but I will. We recognized, meaning my partner, Frank Jordan Jr., that if we were going to grow, we had to have a purpose, a mission. And we were fortunate in that we were short of veterinarians. We wanted to hire somebody, and another fortuitous event occurred in that a young veterinarian named Dr. Steve Henry walked through the door. He'd been in Illinois for 4 years, and I kind of vaguely knew him, but not very well, because we were a couple years apart. He says, I'm looking for a job. I want to be closer to my family. And his family's in Clay County. Another sidebar is, guess whose picture is up on the wall for this same award? My partner of 42 years, Dr. Steve Henry. So he came to us with more ideas, and it struck me, this guy's onto something. We're going to make this practice a premier practice for the general practitioner. And we set out, we put our game plan together. We worked really hard. As we worked hard, we grew the business. Steve is internationally renowned for his abilities and contacts. We expanded the production agricultural side of the business and also the community side of the business. And I'll explain that when I talk to the students tomorrow, but it truly did create a model for a veterinary practice that was somewhat unique to what the times called for, because we transferred from all of us being generalists. We said, Dr. Frank, you're going to do the companion animal. Dr. Steve, you're going to do the swine production. Mike, you're going to do what's left. So that's how it turned out. And I got to do some great things with the mostly livestock, cattle, because that was my background, but then also did some, and still do equine and cattle, and I've been fortunate 44 years later to still do the very things that I so enjoy. But I did some general practice for a few years also. So kind of how did it happen, kind of a past? Who knows, but it did happen.
reflect a bit on your angle there, and that is in the cattle and the equine part of the practice. What do you consider the hallmarks or the things or the singular thing that would stand out as you reflect back on those 40-some years?
This is no surprise to anyone listening to us describe where we were and where we are. The biggest impact that I saw was the consolidation of operations. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about the crop side or the livestock side. I still see the same number of livestock that I did in the late 70s, but I only see 10% of the producers that I saw at that time. That's the big change that happened. The agronomists would say the same thing, or maybe it's 5%, but it's just phenomenal how that's changed. And I'm so proud of my alma mater because of Kansas State and the research that we've done in those very areas, which is what the citizens of Kansas should be proud about, Kansas State, because of the leading technology and improvements that they came about over these last 40-some years.
Any standout anecdotes about something that occurred, some experience in your practice that comes to mind? Serious, humorous, otherwise?
Well, whenever anybody would talk to me, they'd ask me this, what's the most special thing? Well, as a large animal veterinarian, you're always going to have crazy things that say, and they're funnier at the time than they are when you try to relate them 20 years later. But I will say that during my career, I had a client of mine, and he had draft horses over west of Salina, and his name was Charlie Walker. And Charlie was, I'd see a few of his horses, and because I did the large animal, and then he changed directions, and you probably know where I'm going with this. He decided that he wanted to have a zoo. So he says, well, gosh, I need a zoo veterinarian. Well, Mike, you work on large animals. I guess you'd be the guy to come provide veterinary services for. So I got to do all kinds of things with giraffes and lions and tigers and every other thing. And it was an amazing, great experience for me. Fortuitously, the AZA, the Zoological Association, had a requirement that they have a veterinarian on staff. And so I phased out and was replaced by a very talented young veterinarian that has been there ever since I did that. But I have to say that I would regale my livestock clients with zoo experiences, and they wanted to talk about that because, we could talk about a lot of other things, but the zoo thing was kind of unique to have a conversation.
And again, that was the Rolling Hills
The
Zoo,
Rolling Hills Zoo.
west of Salina, which has become somewhat renowned.
Yeah. So again, fortuitous things that happen, but a great life experience as a veterinarian.
Well, Mike, in addition to a successful run in the practice itself, you have assumed numerous leadership roles in the veterinary field, and most recently you are the chair of the board of directors for the American Veterinary Medical Association, which is quite a feather in the cap. When you look at your leanings toward leadership, what drew you in that direction, and what sort of rewards has it brought to bear?
As you say that, it's a refreshing question for me, and I think about leadership. I think about those of us growing up in rural Kansas. Where did we learn about leadership? It was probably 4-H and FFA, which I was a member of and belonged to. And also I recognized, as I tried to emulate my parents, they were somewhat involved and emphasized the importance in a local community of providing leadership. So that kind of opened the door for me to do that. It wasn't something that I planned or aspired to, but all those different years and the variety of experiences I had in many, many different areas, it just fell into place. And again, those mentors that I talked about at Kansas State on the faculty at veterinary medicine encouraged us to give back to our communities. And Dr. Nordsey was one that was probably most influential in that conversation. But it just fell into place. I served in a lot of different things in the Abilene and Dickinson County, central Kansas area. Got involved with the AVMA, we have a volunteer leadership structure with a board of directors. My board mate was Dr. Russell Fry, and he and I, of course, had been friends, but that was really special. Then when that, I'd served a number of years in that area, and there was an opportunity then to run for the position on the National Board of Directors. And the district that I serve takes in 6 states, so we've got Kansas and Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. And that just felt comfortable because I think of we in the Kansas area being central, but also kind of western. So all those states fell into place, and I had a good rapport with them, good conversations, and I campaigned and I visited, and I was challenged to see if, and it's always good if you're going to run for something to have somebody to challenge you. It shouldn't be a coronation. It just shouldn't be. And it sharpened my positions and skills and my speaking abilities, and I was fortunate to be elected. That was 6 years ago. It's a 6-year term, and as I progressed through, then last year I was the vice chair, and then this year I've been very fortunate to be selected as the chairman of the board.
Something comes to mind here. You have a unique vantage point on issues facing the veterinary industry, and when you look ahead to what is coming forth for large animal practices in rural areas, that's been something of an issue in making sure that agriculture can be staffed adequately for animal health. What are your thoughts on where that is headed?
I will share with you, Eric, that my theme for my remarks that I'll share with the students tomorrow in the seminar is the future of veterinary practice, a shared perspective. I want to engage the audience. I want to hear their ideas. I can talk about my observations, but I'm not the one that has to figure out where my pathway is going to be the next 40 years. I've done that. But it's critical to me, and we talked about the consolidation in crop and animal agriculture. Those are the very challenges, and that's why it's probably the highest priority is for me as a leader is to try to figure out how we can keep that compass set in the right direction so that rural communities will continue to receive the quality of care, not just veterinary medicine, but human medicine and all the other things that go into that, because these are individuals that need those services, and we have to figure out how to leverage our abilities and our skills, and I think it will happen. But I'm looking forward to that conversation tomorrow, because that tells me if we get the type of engagement that I expect and it will happen, that these students will have a lot more answers, and my role is just to facilitate that conversation.
Mike, what is next for you?
It's a good question. I plan to bow out as far as being a partner of Abilene Animal Hospital after all these years. My body's beginning to tell me, and you and I were discussing about what happens to old guys with knees and hips. My knees and hips are fine, but my shoulders sure don't feel so good anymore. So what I really want to do is to continue to find other areas as a volunteer, either in the community or here at Kansas State. It doesn't matter. I plan to remain active, but also want to continue the idea of servant leadership, and in doing so, I believe I still have something to contribute in that area.
And we'll close with something you really touched upon earlier, and that is what this recognition means to you as the 2018 Alumni Fellow for the College of Veterinary Medicine. You've been engaged with this college ever since you earned your degree here and stayed very much in contact with it. So this signifies a great deal to you, Mike.
It truly does. Again, I am so honored and humbled to have been selected for that. My response was, yeah, thank you. I'm very touched by that, but also recognize, as I shared with you, 2 other individuals who have received that are very special in my life, and realize that they, like me, didn't just rest on their laurels. They continued forward with contributions, and I plan to do the same thing.
Congratulations on this acknowledgement, and the best of luck as you move forward, Mike. Thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
He is the 2018 Alumni Fellow for the College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University and a longtime partner in Abilene Animal Hospital, Dr. Michael Whitehair.